Hello, welcome to Womb Wisdom, an introduction to reconnecting with your cycles. This course is guided by myself. I'm Amanda, and I have my sister Kristen here with me, and she's going to be guiding us along the way as well with all of her knowledge and wisdom. So I'd love to start off by sharing a little bit about myself, and then my sister will go and share a little bit about herself as well. I do psycho-spiritual work. I have deep roots in the practice of curanderismo, which is really closely related to the practice of shamanism. It's all about being deeply connected to the elements, to working with earth-based healing modalities, to being aligned and living from a place of embodiment, listening to the intuition that is within us, being connected to the animal realms, the plant kingdom, and really honoring the cyclicality and the seasons of my body as a woman and the cycles and seasons of Mother Earth. So I'm really excited to be sharing this wisdom with you today because it's definitely underground wisdom that gets passed down from woman to woman, whether it be generationally or through workshops and programs like this one in this modern time. So it's really exciting to be in this position to allow you to receive all the knowledge, all the wisdom that you need to be able to really align yourself with your cycles and seasons so that you can thrive too. So feel free to share a little bit about yourself too, Kristen.
Hello. So as my sister shared, my name is Kristen. Yes, we are biological sisters. I am a classically trained Western medicine practitioner. I currently work as a physician assistant. I've been working with family medicine and urgent care primarily for these past almost decade. Crazy how the time flies. I also have been learning herbalism. So that's also Western herbalism, but incorporating aspects of Chinese traditional medicine, South American herbs, and studying with the Mayan cosmovision. I use sound healing and cacao ceremonies to really help people reconnect with themselves, and have been on my spiritual path for several years now. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be able to share this wisdom with you all and give you the knowledge that you need to empower yourself, and remember that all of the knowledge that we have is already within us. And when we learn what tools we have and when to use them, it really makes a difference in the quality of our daily life.
Absolutely. Let's begin. So what is the womb space? It's the home of the female reproductive system. It's the physical location of where a fetus develops. And from the psycho-spiritual perspective, it's the center of our power, our creative and sexual energy, which you might know as our libido. If you do not have your actual physical reproductive system, you still have the womb space, you still have the sacral chakra, you still have the root chakra, which are all deeply connected to the energetics of the womb, which, as I mentioned, is all about really feeling empowered, connected to our creative energy.
And I'll just add on here that you don't have to be only female to have a womb space. It is also a very potent space for males as well, because it is our creative center and it's where our sacral chakra is stored, regardless of what gender we choose to assume. And so this knowledge is really important, not just for women, but for everybody, because it helps all of us learn how to tune in more deeply with our innate wisdom, gifts, and those abilities so that we can better share them with other people. So this beautiful diagram that we have here may be taking some of you back to high school biology classes. This is the anatomical representation of what a uterus looks like. And you have the ovaries, which are depicted on the sides. They look like the two little cotton balls. And then we've got the little fingers, which are the fimbriae, or the finger-like projections, which bring the egg that is released from the ovary all the way into the uterine space during certain cycles of our menstrual period. And then you have the little canal. That is where a baby eventually comes out if somebody chooses to conceive in this lifetime. And it passes through the cervix. And then you have the actual vagina, the walls of the vagina. And that is where blood loss happens, or blood is shed, or a baby is passed through the portal as they come into this lifetime. So this here is a extensive list of any combination of these can be categorized as someone having a hormonal imbalance. As you can see, the list is very long. Some of the symptoms are very vague and generalized, such as fatigue, muscle aches, stress, acne, weight gain. Some of them are very particular. And depending on whether you have estrogen too high, progesterone too low, or progesterone too high, estrogen too low, and any combination of hormones that are disrupted, these are just some of the symptoms that people can begin to experience when they're describing a hormonal imbalance. So from a clinical setting, these are kind of some of the things that I'm looking for or asking about or paying particular attention to when people come in for a consult, or, when we're talking about birth control or things like that, because the symptoms that people are presenting with will tell you what is in excess, what is deficient, what needs to be improved, and how can we tweak that system so that our body is functioning in harmony. Yes, and speaking of birth control, I think this is a really important time to stress that birth control is not a one-size-fits-all approach. I've worked with thousands of women over the course of my clinical years, and I have a really hard time with people who just prescribe birth control for, any symptoms. Women come in and they're feeling vulnerable and they're frustrated by the symptoms that they're presenting with. Oh, I've got all this hair that's coming out here. My sideburns are so thick. Oh, my weight is really out of control. It's like very fluctuates a lot. And so I think that when you look at birth control, like I said in the previous slide, you have to really take into account the entire picture of a person. I think to just assign, here, try these pills, I hope that this works out for you, is a very poor way to practice. And so I say this to you because I just want people to be really aware, and I really want people to make conscious decisions when they go to a healthcare provider. We live in a Western society, if you're watching this somewhere in America, where our system is very overworked and very time constrained, but that shouldn't mean that you're getting a lesser quality of care or your concerns are not being listened to or validated. So it's up to us as the patients who know our bodies best to walk into a practitioner's office and say, these are my symptoms. I've looked at these things online. What do you think would be most helpful for me? I read XYZ. Do you know anything about this? And, feel free to ask people if they know or not. We don't know everything, not all of us are going to know as much about birth control as others. For example, like a male practitioner versus a female practitioner, because for example, I am female, and that's something that I have personally had to dig deep and do my own research on so that I can help others make informed decisions as well. So just making sure that you are really consciously choosing to be on birth control for a valid reason. Like, I do not want to have children right now. Because a lot of times what I see is people come in and they say, I'm struggling with my weight gain, I'm having XYZ, and then, a prescription for birth control is written for the next year. And there's hardly any monitoring done or checking to make sure that that is actually working or helping with those symptoms. And what we want to make sure we're doing is getting to the root of why these symptoms are even occurring in the first place, instead of just putting a band-aid on them and masking whatever our body is trying to tell us. The signs and the symptoms that we experience is our body saying, hey, this is wrong with me. Please help me fix this. So when we just take artificial hormones, it really confuses our body and it doesn't let us get to the root of why that's even happening in the first place. So I think I covered most of these things. Yep. Make sure you let your provider know what your goals are. So why are you getting on birth control? Make sure that you've been explicit about what you're experiencing with your cycle symptoms. Hopefully you've been tracking it for 2 to 3 months before you go see a provider for talking about birth control. There are so many options out there, from IUDs to injections to implants in the arm to NuvaRing to birth control pills. So just making sure that you yourself are well versed makes it a lot easier for the healthcare provider when they're seeing you. And most importantly, do your research, because every single thing that we ingest in our body has secondary effects, whether we want it to or not. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from being a patient in these times. It's making sure that we've done our research so that when someone says something to us that we don't think it's right, we know we've cross-checked our sources and that we're making intelligent and informed decisions to the best of our ability. Yes, and I kind of spoke about this briefly. So just you know your body better than anybody else. You live in that body 365 days a year, every single day of your life. So when you go in to see a practitioner for 10, 15 minutes of your time, if you're lucky to get that much time with them, understand that the symptoms that you're describing and the way that you describe what you're feeling, only you can do that the best that you can. Don't let somebody put words in your mouth that aren't there. And I say this because, like I said, I see a lot of people who go in, they describe their symptoms and they're kind of like given a recommendation. If you don't agree with that recommendation, you have every single right to go home, research it, take a rain check, go home, really think about it, and then come back and maybe accept that decision or say, you know what, actually, I went online and I saw it causes this, this, and this. Maybe I'd rather try something else. And most importantly, we're not just putting band-aids on the symptoms that we're having and hoping that that's a cure-all and, it's a magic pill. We really want to make sure that we're saying, okay, I'm struggling with XYZ right now. Maybe this will temporarily fix this for me. Or what are my other alternative options in a more holistic approach that will help me get to why I'm experiencing XYZ symptoms? So only you know your body.
Yes, and something that I would love to add is that a lot of the discomfort, the hormonal imbalances that women are experiencing not only come from dietary choices, the extreme lifestyle stressors that we are experiencing, it also comes from a psycho-spiritual place of being disconnected from our cyclicality, of being disconnected from this baseline information that can actually help us harness our cycles and embrace our cycles. So if we are actually ashamed of the fact that we even bleed in the first place, if we are rejecting having a period or angry when our period arrives, all of those feelings that we have towards our bleed, towards being female, even because so many women are actually conditioned to say, oh my gosh, I wish I was a guy, I wish I was a man, right? Because it's easier to fit into the systems if we're men, because the systems we have support men just a little bit more than they do women. They're not sustainable for men either, but they definitely sustain men a little bit more than they do for women. So if we have this relationship with our bleed, with being female, it can create a lot of somatic symptoms in the body that can present as irregular periods, that can present as, acne, cramping, hirsutism, ovarian cysts, right? These are all physical manifestations of a psycho-spiritual imbalance that we have in relation to our bleed. And I'll pause there. Let's see what's on the next slide. Perfect. So we're going to connect with the womb space. So feel free to close the eyes wherever you are, and you can just relax in your chair. If you're not in a place where you can close your eyes, you can always save this meditation for later. And feel free to take a long, slow, deep breath in and a long, slow, deep breath out. And feel free to place your palms on the low belly, the right hand where the right ovary would be, left hand where the left ovary would be. And for most women, this is a first, to consciously connect with the womb space in this way, to consciously choose to place the hands here. And it's very normal for there to be resistance, discomfort, even with the word womb itself. There's a lot of confusion because we're very disconnected from this space. So just take a long, slow, deep breath in. And a long, slow, deep breath out. This is a very sensitive space. It's where all of this life force energy is always brewing. And this is also our center of feeling fully empowered in our sensuality, our sexuality, ideally being completely unashamed to bleed, completely unashamed of our bodies, unashamed of speaking our truth. And this center is often blocked by grief, anger, resentment, any kind of energetic trauma that's been stored here from any kind of abuse, whether it's psychological, verbal, sexual. So a lot can come up when we do this work. So feel free to take another long, slow, deep breath in and a long, slow, deep breath out. And just letting your womb know that you are here, you're consciously connecting, you are listening in from this moment forward, and that you are open to being aligned with your cycles, your seasons, and all the wisdom that lives here in the womb. Taking another long, slow, deep breath in and a long, slow, deep breath out. And then whenever you're ready, feel free to release the hands and open the eyes and come back to the space. And feel free to pause the video and journal what came up for you. What was that like to connect in that way? Did it feel unfamiliar? Did feelings from the past come up? Memories, thoughts, emotions? And then sit with whatever it is that pours out onto the paper, and take your time to nurture and explore whatever it is that comes up for you, because it's potent and vital information for healing our physical body and for diving even deeper into our healing at the spiritual level.
So this is a very daunting photo of what the menstrual cycle actually looks like. This is just so that you guys can get an understanding of how complex the body is. And this is just like the reproductive system for women. So it's pretty amazing and fascinating and truly a blessing when we get our period every month. And our period should really be treated as our vital sign, the same way that we look at our heart rate and our blood pressure and how many respirations we take a minute and our body temperature. I think it's really important to look at the messages that are being given to us by our bleed every month. So just kind of a brief overview. You can see how many things we're tracking here. We're looking at the follicle that's growing, which eventually turns into an egg, which may or may not get fertilized depending on what our goals in life are. We're looking at the body temperature, and more specifically, the temperature in our womb space to determine whether or not an egg is released. We're looking at the hormones that are being released from our pituitary, which is in our brain, which is what controls FSH, LH being released. We're looking at the hormones that are being produced by the ovaries, estradiol and progesterone. And then we're also looking at the layer of our uterus, the endometrial layer, and we're looking at how thick that's getting and how thin that's getting, and when it's ready and time for that layer to slough off, which is what is actually being shed during our period. So just so that you guys can see how complex and amazing our uterus is and how many little details go in to create what we just look up so often and just like, oh yeah, I just got my period. These are all the things that had to happen for that to actually come into fruition. And this is kind of like a nicer chart that kind of shows you the two main phases. You've got the follicular phase and the luteal phase, and then that gets broken up into two smaller phases under each of those umbrellas. And there's videos that go a little bit more in depth about that if you'd like to know more about it.
Yes. So we highly recommend getting in touch with the womb because this work is so life-changing. It's so beneficial to be aligned with our cyclicality because our cycles are in direct alignment with the cycles of the moon. We are the moon. We are the moon. And we look up at the moon and we're like, wow, the moon looks beautiful. And so the goal is to look at ourselves, to see our cyclicality, and to see how we are changing. We have phases just like the moon, and love ourselves in every phase of our journey instead of only loving ourselves in ovulation and then being really upset with ourselves when we're going through whatever highs and lows we're experiencing when we're bleeding or in any other aspects of our cycle. So feel free to tune in for the next videos where we do an in-depth dive into all of the baseline information that you need to really remain connected with your cycles and with your seasons. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in the next few videos.